Hello guys, hope I'm audible. Can anyone confirm if I'm audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, we'll start at 9:05. Sure. All right, I think we can start. So, in the past sessions, we have seen how to do on the front end with React and how to do the back end with Flask separately. Now we've just left with a small concept in React, with which is use effect, which will be taken by Samrit, and then we will see. If you remember, we did the counter application in the front end as well as in the back end separately, right? So here we'll be integrating that at first. That will be taken by me next, and after that we will do a trivia application from scratch, and we'll try to complete it. We'll show how to do the front end, the back end, and how to integrate them. Okay, so I think Samrit, you can start with the use effect thing.
Yeah, just a second. I'm sharing the screen. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yeah, we can see.
So last time when I talked about React, we talked about use state, and use state is a hook used to manage state. So these are variables which we can change, and whenever we change them, the component is rendered again. So another hook that we have is called use effect. And if you see this use effect call, it's very strange. It's a function, and inside the function we pass another function, and then we pass an empty array for no apparent reason. So why is all of this, I will explain to you guys. So uh, use effect is a hook which is basically used to synchronize your component with any external data. Okay, so in our case, that is the main use of it. So in our case, our external data is this API we have. And so what we need to do is, whenever this component loads, we need to run this. Okay, we need to fetch the data from the API, but we don't need to run this code on every re-render of this component, because whenever we change this count, this is this component will re-render. But let's if we had some other piece of state, let's say a name or something, which is not tied to the database, and whenever we are changing the name, we will be if fetching this code again and again. So if I hadn't done this, okay, if I had done only this, so if we see look at the network tab, if I increment it,
Samrit, you need to start the backend.
no, I'm just trying to see if this fetch request is being made or not. I know that there will be no answer, but is this fetch request being made or not?
Yeah, right, right.
Interesting. Yeah, so we reload this. You see this get counter has been called. Okay, that
Samrit, we can't see your screen actually. It's stuck.
it's stuck. Wait,
Yeah.
I'll reshare it.
Yeah, yeah.
I can see it now, right? Yeah. Okay, so over here, let's do one thing. Let's make another piece of state, which is main. Okay, let's call it count. Let's make a temp count state. This count won't be sent to our backend.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think your screen is not visible. Is it just for me or for others also?
When I'm sharing the screen,
Yeah, it is not visible.
Not visible.
visible. I am presenting my screen. I don't know what the problem is then. Let try it again.
Yeah, yeah, it was visible for a moment.
Yeah, I just closed it. I mean, with that.
Uh-huh.
This one.
Yeah,
Glitch. Can you see my screen now?
yeah, it's visible now.
Okay, just tell me if it isn't. So I created this temp count state, and what I'll do is I will create another button. This button, one click, will decrement this count. Set temp count to minus one, and the data on this button is okay. Let's try this out. So now get counter call gets called here. When we click on this button, the count is being decremented, and you see this get counter is being called again. And whenever I'm clicking this button, this is being called again and again and again. Now this is happening very fast because the server doesn't exist. But let's say this was a very expensive fetch call that we were making. This would be a problem because we don't want this to happen on every run because we are just changing the temp counter, which shouldn't change the value of this variable on the server. So over here, placing this fetch code on the top level of the component does not work. So what can we do? What we want is that we want this code to run only when we open this component for the first time. Okay. And not on any re-renders caused by any state changes. Okay. For that, we have the use effect. So I will switch the use effect on, and let's reload our page completely. So yeah, this now when I'm clicking this button, this get counter is not being called again and again. Okay, so this has just solved our issue magically. So let's see what this use effect actually does. So use effect, whenever we call it, has three parts. Has two parts. It has a
Screen
function.
stuck somewhere again.
Screen start again.
Yeah, yeah. Are you like VIT or hostel Wi-Fi or
Yeah, I'm
try again? I think it's stuck. Yeah.
I'll try my mobile data. I'm not sure it will work as well because it is also very slow. Reconnecting. Just a second. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Let me share my screen
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
See it now, right?
Yeah, we can see it now.
So whenever use effect is called, it has two main parts. It takes a function and a dependency array. Okay, and that function has some stuff happening over here, and that function can have a return value. Okay, it returns something as well. So these are the three parts of a use effect function: the actual function, this return value, and our dependency array. So now let's remove this use effect. Not remove it. Let's write a use effect thing with our own. So first of all, we need to pass a function that will console log open order. Okay, over here the component is being rendered for the first time and our dependency array is. Okay, so now if we go to our app, we refresh, you will see ignore these errors, but component rendered for the first time. Okay, so this is working. So what does this mean? This use effect takes in a function, and that function is called whenever any value in this array changes. Okay, so it will be called once when the component is rendered for the first time, and whenever the component any value given inside this array has changed from the previous time when this use effect ran, it will run this code again, else it will not. So if we never wanted to rerun, and if you only wanted to run for the first time the component is rendered, we can pass in an empty array. Okay, so now let's see what happens if I pass temp count over here. Okay, I can because temp count changes. Okay, so by passing temp count over here, whenever this temp count value will change, this code will be run again. So because it's running for the first time, it will say for the first time, and because temp count changes. And now whenever I click on this button, component rendered because temp count changes. So what is exactly happening when I press this button? Set the temp count value is getting deprecated, and we are calling the set temp count function. When the set temp count function is called, the state is changed, so this app component will rerun, and while it's rerunning, use effect will be seen, and React will see, okay, the dependency is the temp count variable. The last time it was called, the temp count was 0, and now it's -1, so the value has changed, so I need to run this code again. Okay, and one last part of use effect is the value that is returned by the function. So I can return. I I need to return a function. Component. Okay, so when the component is rendered for the first time, it is called being mounted. Okay, so the return value of this function inside the use effect has to be a function, and this function is ran whenever this component gets unmounted. Okay. So I don't think this will be unmounted whenever we are running this code. Okay, unmounting will require other stuff, this. But we can do one thing for that. We can create our own component and try it with that. Let's put this over here. We can put this use effect over here, and we can return component. I have tried this before, but I think it should work. If it doesn't, then let's put this one. There is stem component which is not getting rendered. So let's okay. So now why the hell is this? Term count is greater than negative 2, then render this becomes well, this component name needs to be capital. That was something I forgot. In JSX, only the pre-built HTML tags can start with a small letter. Every user-defined component has to start with a capital letter. That's why it was working out. Okay, so we have our temp component here, and when it okay, so you see, I'll show this to you again. Right, our temp component is shown only when the temp count value is greater than -2. Okay, and by default the value is 0. Okay, so in our app over here, when I press it for the first time, this temp count changed again. So I've clicked it again. This component disappears because this component is no longer being rendered, and because when it's being removed from the page, it is being unmounted. So this component has unmounted function gets run over here. Okay, so these are the three cases when use effect runs. Okay, when so anything inside this function is ran when the component mounts. Okay, it is ran when this dependency array anything in the dependency array changes, and it is ran when and the function returned by this function is ran when this component gets unmounted. Okay, so this use effect hook can be used in this way to basically work with what's called a component life cycle. So the component is changed, it's re-rendered, and then it's mounted, rendered, re-rendered, and then unmounted. So we can play with these three steps using this use effect function. Okay, and in our case, we use this for fetching data from the backend. So whenever this get app gets loaded for the first time, this will be fetched, and whenever this doesn't need to happen again and again. Okay, so that was the use case for use effect. Any doubts in use effect? Anyone? How it works exactly? Because it is a bit tricky. Like you must remember to put things in the dependency array and everything. So no doubts, right? No doubts, right? Then we are done with use effect relation. You can go along with the integration of the front end and the back end now.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Ahmed. So Let me just share the screen with you so that you can see how the counter application was integrated with the front end and the back end. So if you have been following along since the first session, you must remember, wait, let me start this. Just right. Just showing you this thing. Okay. I will go to trivia once the integration is done. Sorry, 5174. Cool. So this is our latest app which is running, and I think this should be our older app. Okay. So let me go ahead and run both of them to show the difference. Okay. Now see, I hope you can see my screen, right? Yeah. So if I just do increment here, it's not working. Sorry, I have to start my backend also. One second. Because this has been integrated with the backend, right? So I have to start my backend once. Just Flask run. Oops. Okay, API Flask run. That should start my backend. Okay. Just refresh it. Okay, now you can see it was showing 0, but now it fetched the data from my backend which was stored in my database. Now it's 22, so it's showing that. So if I increment it, it will show you 23. Then I increment 24, then decrement 23. Okay, so this is this app which is running on the latest version. Okay, if you don't have the links, I'll share you the links also once. You can go ahead with this to see the whole code. So this is running with integrated with our backend. Okay, so initially when we started our React app, like just for the front end, you can see the count is 0 here, right? But if you do increment here, is this also increment here? Like, I think it's also integrated, I suppose. Let me just try one thing very quickly. If not, I'll show you with the code processed. Okay. Let me do this. Get reset. Actually, just let me check one second. Okay, it has the latest code. Anyways, let's skip this. So what I was saying you is instead when it was running without, if you remember in the first session, it was showing 0, and when we were clicking increment, it was just incrementing here, and decrement, it was doing it here. So all of this was happening inside the React code itself. So it was not sending the data anywhere to a server in the backend or fetching data from the database, right? So what we did to change it, okay, let's read the code once. What was changed to achieve it? So firstly, firstly, if you remember, we were starting our Flask backend. It was served in this local host with 5000 ports. So I'm just giving this the URL just so that I don't have to use the whole link again and again. And then what I did is, you must have known the I Samrit covered use effect, what it does. So firstly, I am instead of assigning the like getting the value from here, set count here, const count here, I'm getting it from my database. Okay, so for the first time using use effect, and then there is this route in my backend get counter. I'll show you the backend code side by side also, so that it's easy. Just zoom in. All right, so if you see our backend code, we have a route called as get counter here. Okay, so what it does is it basically gets runs a query on the database, and it gives the identifier as 123, and then it returns the result as a JSON object. Basically, it says the counter assigns this property with this value, which is you must have remember when we are running the backend, we use this to print the value, current value in the database. So we are basically assigning it in an object, and we are we are using JSONify library to convert it into a JSON, JavaScript object notation object, and then we are returning this. We are basically returning a JSON from our backend in this route get counter. Okay. So what it does is, even I can show you what happens if you visit this link. It's running, our backend is running here, right? So if I go and use get counter, it gives me, yeah, this is the result that it is returning to the front end. Okay, counter equals the current value. So going back to our code again in the front end. So we are just using promises again, and then we are processing the JSON, the response in the JSON, and then we are setting the count as data dot counter. So whatever value, if you remember here, we have this in the JSON, we have this counter, right? So we are accessing this, we are getting this result. So we are passing the JSON, and we are getting the value of the property named as counter. Okay, so that's how we are dereferencing basically. So in this, we are getting first what we are doing, we are fetching using the fetch API. Then we are just giving our URL, which is here, and then on the route we are providing the route. If you remember, this is a template string. So what it does is it basically processes the whole URL, and then once the result of this fetch is obtained, we are storing it in a rest, you can say variable, and then we are calling the .json method to parse this JSON. Then again, we are the data that is it is received after parsing the JSON, we are storing in the name of data, and we are dereferencing the value of counter from the data. So if you see here, this is the counter, so we are dereferencing the value, that is 26, and then we are assigning it to our count here. So this is, we are using the use state, right? So we are calling this method to assign the value of the count. Okay, so initially it's 0, but when this is called, this whenever the request is made here, the count from the database is fetched and put into the count variable. Okay, so this is run only once because we don't have anything in the dependency array. All right. And then here what we have new is, we are just having two new functions called as increment counter and then decrement counter. Okay, if you remember in the earlier code, what we have essentially, we just had this thing, and then we had two buttons called as increment and decrement. And on click, what we are doing is, we are just calling the set count. We are calling the value of set count, and then whatever was the current value, we are incrementing one here, and then we were just decrementing one here. So everything was done on the React side only, on the client side. But now, since we have introduced our backend, so we have defined two functions here, increment and decrement, and then we are calling those whenever this button is clicked. The on click function in the button calls this function, okay, increment counter, and whenever this button is clicked on the decrement, this function is called. So if you go into one of these functions, async, already covered. So whenever increment counter is called, what we are doing is, we are basically making a fetch again, making a fetch to this URL. Okay, again in our backend, we have this URL called as increment counter. So if you remember, we, in our backend, separately had increment counter, which was increasing the value of the database, like the count value in the database earlier in the process session. But we modified it a bit. If you remember, it was a get a method, it was working on a get method, so that whenever you were visiting this in the URL itself, like let's say increment counter, right? Increment count. Now if you visit, it will say you method not allowed, because what you are doing now, you're just making a get request. So if in our code, we are just allowing a post request, right? So you can't just visit in the URL to make increment. Okay, you have to make a post request to this endpoint. So that's what we are doing. So in this post request, what we are doing is, we are fetching the current value first by using the filter clause in the database. Then whatever is the current value, we are assigning one to it, and then we are just doing a db.session.commit. And if it's successful, if the value is incremented, we are returning a response, sample response from the server with status 201. Now if you remember the status codes again, 200 are the success codes, 200 to 299. So we are returning 201 to say that, okay, this response is valid, like whatever you requested from the front end to increment the counter, that was successfully done, and this is your response. In case something went wrong, then we are just going in the except part, and then we are just returning a 400 status. That means we are returning a response with status code 400, which says that it's a like whatever you are doing couldn't happen due to some other reason. We can see those reasons once your debugging is on in your app, so you can see it on your server side, like what went wrong. Okay, Similarly, for the decrement counter itself, we have the same thing, just -1 here. So here are the two endpoints that was decided here. Initially, it was get when it was done only on the back end, but now we are, since we are combining front end and back end both, we are making a post method here. We are just allowing the post method to be like to be allowed in this endpoint. And whenever your React front end, whenever so let me tell you what happens when you click the this button, right? Increment button. So on the on click function here calls your increment counter function, and that increment counter function in here, it fetches this, like it makes a call to this URL with a method called as post. Then these are the headers that is generally passed with every request, content type application JSON, because we are passing JSON data basically, since we are not passing any data, but since it's like the standard header, if you're passing anything in the body, you should have this thing, because generally we pass a JSON from to and fro from the client and server. Okay. So yeah, so we are making a post request here with this method to this URL. So whenever this is done, once your and after this thing, like basically your fetch is done, like after your backend has processed and returned the response, we are storing it in the variable response, and we are seeing if response is okay, then print that it is incremented. Okay. Now if we see our, if we open our console and if we do increment, you can see you can see the incremented here. Okay. Now it's reloading because I've just used a reload function, which we shouldn't be using. This was before this, since your this thing like use effect wasn't covered. That's why. Let's see what happens if I comment it out. Okay. And comment this out. All right, and now let me save this. I hope this part was clear. We are just making a post request and then the response. What response.ok checks is, dot OK is basically a method which checks that is the response code, the status code between 200 to 299. If it is, then it does this thing. Okay. So instead of checking response.status code equal to in between 200 299, we can straightly use this function called response.ok. Okay. Now, if we just comment out the reload thing, let's see what happens. Let me turn this on, and if I do increment, okay, I think it's the wrong one. Oh, yeah. I shouldn't have opened both of those. Why is it still reloading? Oh, I might not have opened the correct one. Okay, yeah, I was editing in the wrong one. Let just one second. Let me comment in the main thing, cdsrc vim app.jsx, and in here let me comment out this. Okay, let me comment out the reload function. So let's see what happens without this. Okay, now my count is 30 in the database. So you can see it shows that it's incremented, but this thing is not updated. So if I do increment again, you can see it's printed twice. So the increment is happening, but this is not changing. Do you have any idea why this is happening? And if you do decrement also, it will show you that it's decremented, but the value is not reflected. To solve this only, we have this use effect, right? So let me go and, so if you remember the dependency array that somebody talked about, so in here you can see it's an empty array now. So your use effect isn't called, like what it should do is it should fetch from the database only when certain certain variables inside the dependency array is changed, right? The state is changed. So in here, if we put count and
Uh,
then
we can only see the terminal on your screen. I think it's stuck again.
it's stuck. Okay, okay.
Is it stuck for others?
I think it's working, right? Anyone can
Now
confirm?
it's
Can anyone confirm?
now yeah. Now I can. Now it's working.
It's working.
Okay, okay. Srivatsa, is it working?
It is working now, but it was stuck in the terminal before.
Okay, okay, okay. Let me. Okay, okay. Is it, if it's stuck, let me change it to show the. Just give me a second. I hope you can see my browser now, right? Okay. In here, if you do
Yeah.
increment, you can see your in the console it's showing that it's incremented. Okay, but the value is not changing. If you do decrement, it's showing also it's decremented. The function is done, the response is done, everything is done, but the value here is not changing. So this is happening because our we are not changing the state. Like if you remember in the use effect that Samrit covered, what we are doing is we are fetching the value from the database, right? Like from our backend in this route. So in here we don't have anything the dependency array. So since it's blank, it's just calling only when like it's not going to change. It's just calling once when you run the code. But if you add count variable in this dependency array, now whenever count is changed, like whenever increment counter or decrement counter is run, so the count is changed, so it will face the latest value from your database. Okay. Now if you do this, uh, just a second. Samir, I think is it not? Is this not how it works?
Can you show me again what you were doing?
I'm just hiding the count in the dependency array, right? It should work whenever the state is changed.
Actually, you're not changing the state on button presses. The increment counter is
Is it not? I
if you
think we were calling this right. Just a
the
second.
increment counter should change the value as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, we are not actually calling this function, right? Set count here. We're not calling actually. If you remember, all this increment and decrement is going on the server side, right? So the set count is not actually being called. That's why the state is actually not changing. So it will
Yeah,
give
and
you no.
also you don't need to give count in the dependency array. Just
Yeah,
change it
actually,
over
yeah,
here. That will work.
yeah. All right. So since we are not dealing with like changing the state in the React front end, I don't think we will be able to show you that. But yeah, uh, this was the idea. Like you can see why use effect is also used, right? I hope you got the idea. So this is how we integrated the front end and back end of the counter application. Any doubts as of now, guys? Any doubts?
No.
All right. It's pretty much simple. We are just using the URL that was given by your Flask backend, and then on based on the different routes and the methods that we are giving, post, uh, get, post, and all. We are just using that to do the functionalities. Okay, nothing much. Okay. Now this covers your counter application is done, and all the latest code is available in this repository. So whenever you're free and you can go along and see, if you have any doubts you can let us know. Now let's go to a total different thing. Let's make a trivia application, okay, from scratch. We'll try to, if the time permits. So I want all of you to go to this website. So what is a trivia application basically? It's just a quiz type of application, right? So it has some questions and it has some options. So it's like MCQ. So if you choose the correct ones and how many, based on how many ones you choose, your marks or your points get incremented, right? That's what your trivia application does. So if I do this, it shows me wrong answer. If I do something like that, just, and if we click on the right answer, it should show you the right answer, right? So this is your trivia application. So for this, what do you think we should do in the backend? So first we are going to start in the backend, right? And once the backend is ready, we'll be showing the different statuses on the front end, okay, for this trivia application. So in the backend, as I told you, there are two main things that we'll do in the backend. One is the logic and one is your database. So for this, what do you think we should have in the backend? We should have a database named trivia or questions, and it should have the question, all these questions, right? It should have all these questions along with all these options in the questions. Yeah, any answers?
Questions and list of options and correct answer.
Perfect. So it should have the question, the list of options, and what which option is the correct one. Okay, that it should have. And one more thing also, since we are having multiple questions, it's better to index them, so we can have a question ID for each question, right? So that should be all in your database. And in coming to the logic, what we need to do is, in the backend logic, we need to like all these questions that you are seeing, it's not rendered in the front end, right? It's not stored in your front end. It's actually passed from your backend. So your front end is making a fetch call again to your backend, and it returns all this list of questions, right? So the logic, coming to the logic, we should have one endpoint in Flask which returns the list of all these questions fetching from the database. And once that is done, we should have a function in the we should have an endpoint in the backend which takes the question ID and takes the option that is given by the user and checks if the option is correct or not, like if the answer is correct or not. And if it's correct, it returns the correct answer, or if it's wrong, it should return the wrong answer, right? So that's pretty much it, right? Let's forget about the points as of now. Let's not focus on the points, but about this wrong answer, right answer, this should be all that your backend does, right? All right, so let's do that also. We'll try doing the backend first. If you have doubts at any point, feel free to stop me. I'll be going a bit fast. Like I try to cover everything. Okay, this is the entire code. If you want to see along the code, so let's close all of this and start from scratch. Should I? Yeah, let me make another. Oh, oops. Okay, I don't have anything in this folder. Okay, I'm going to start from scratch. For reference, let me open our master file also. It's in trivia app, right? In the backend folder, I have this app.py which has all things implemented. So let's try to focus. Let's try to do all the things that we have discussed here. Okay. So let's make a list first. First, we have to do a DB. It has with all the columns. Then we have to do two endpoints basically. One to return all questions, and other to validate a particular answer. Okay. Okay, that should be all that we need to focus on right now. So start from the scratch. So we'll import from Flask, import from Flask, import Flask. Then yeah, let me make a Flask. Let me give my the name of my app as API. Okay, cool. And if if um, equals name, I will do api.run. Okay, that's pretty much the skeleton code you need to start with. All right, now from here, let's first make a root or default root. Okay, in here, let me define welcome definition. That should return me hello. You have reached our backend for trivia app. Okay, now let's save all this to see if we are doing all things right. And then open another terminal, go to Flask session, and then let me run my Flask app. Flask. And let's go in here. 127. Okay, let me open it side by side, easier. Okay. All right. Now you can see in our home root we have this hello. You have reached our trivia application. So our skeleton is ready. Now let's focus on the next things that we need to do. So first coming to DB, right? So first let's for DB we'll be using SQLite again. So we'll use SQL Alchemy for that. From Flask SQL Alchemy import SQL Alchemy. Yeah. All right. And then let me do api.secret key. I have to define any random secret key that you want. Let me be my secret key. Then I have to give a name for my database. It's I think MySQL. Let me see. SQL Alchemy database URI. I think it's that. Yeah. So SQL Alchemy database URI, and then let me give it my name. I want to give it SQLite, and this is the syntax SQLite with three forward slashes. Then let's say trivia. Okay, trivia.db. Let it be my database name. All right. Now we have this. Let's see what we have to define our db, right? Yeah, let's define our db. These are all the simple things that you need to do before setting up your database. Okay, we'll define our db with this thing api, and now let's create our database, a db model. Let's create our database model. Okay, that will be done with a class. So let's say class trivia. So this is the name of our table. In here, let's do first we should have a unique id for every question, right? So we'll do unique id equals db dot column, and it should be db dot integer. It should be integer. Let's say it will start indexing from 1. Then nullable equals false. It shouldn't be null, and then we can set it as our primary key also, right? Primary key equals true. All right, now let me just copy all the other methods that we need to do. I'll just, I think, do this. It's better to write here so that you also get an idea. Okay, let's now first write the code first here. Okay. Just paste this. Okay, question equals db dot. I should have this. This should have my question, right? So it's a string. I can give it a maximum of 128 characters. You can give whatever you want. Nullable equals false. It shouldn't be null, and unique. Yeah, we don't want our questions to be unique as of now. Let's as of now let's keep it as false. Okay.
The other
Now,
screen is stuck again for me. I can see the trivia app open on the browser, but I can't see what you're typing exactly.
okay. If it's stuck, please feel free to like tell me. Okay, stop in between. I think it's the hostel Wi-Fi. Can you see my code now?
Yeah, now I can see it. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Amrit. So in here, what we did was I think, yeah, API. This is common. Then we gave a secret key. Then we have defined our name for our database, that is trivia.db. Then we are initializing our DB with SQL Alchemy API. Then we are creating the model, right? So we are giving the name of our database as of our table as trivia, okay? And then we are giving a unique ID for every question. That question should be like the ID should be integer, right? So we're giving it as db dot integer, and we're also giving the primary key as true. Like let it be the primary key of the database. Now we are going with the question. Now this should have the question text, right? So let's say who is the president of India. So that should be stored in this question. Now after, so it's a string. So I'm using the string data type. Okay. Now we should have an option, right? Option. Then it should be also a string. Then nullable equals false as of now. Let's say then unique also. Let's keep it as false as of now. Okay. So I'll just copy paste it for the four options. Oops, one second. All right. I'll just copy paste it. Let me do it as option 2, option 3, and option 4. So these are my four options having the same string type and a unique, and this thing is false. Now we should have a correct answer also. Correct answer equals db. Okay, it's there. And delete this db.column. Yeah, I think this should be all that we need to store in our database for this. Now we can also do a points. We can also create a points column to store the points of the user. But yeah, that's on you. You can do it as a like extension or a homework after this. After if you have done this, you can keep a track of the points of the user. All right. So this is my database model. Now like the model is created, but you need to do it like implement it on the physical database, right? How will you do? So we'll make a route for that. We'll make a route for that, which will basically do all this, like create a query, like run a query that will have all these models implemented in my database. So I'll do api.route, let's say, let's call that as create db, and then let me do the create db function. In here it should do, let me do it in a try block, then I should do db dot create all, right? Yeah. And then return, hey, your database was successfully created. Now my, if everything runs well, like the db dot create all is done, what it does is basically it creates your database with all these columns. Okay, so once this execution is correct and if it's done properly, it returns me this message. Else, if something went wrong, then I have, let me accept exception as e. I have this exception, I can print. Okay, let me not print, I'll just straight away return it. Return, sorry, there was a so there was a problem while creating your DB, and let me just print it here, str. Okay, so this is what it should do. If I save this and flask run already means, okay, it's already running. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, run it again. There is an error from SQL. Oh, sorry, a mistake. It should be import, right? Hmm. Now if I go and run my flask again, again this error. In what language? Got unique class trivia. Okay, my bad. I made a typo, and the worst thing is it's copied to everything else. Very nice. Yeah, looks good now. Unique again. Unique. Array. Okay, last one. I left this one. Hmm. Yeah, now that my server is running, let me go to this thing. 127. Okay, sorry, I have it here. Yeah. Now let me go to create DB, right? This is my endpoint to create my database. Okay, now I get this, hey, your database was created successfully. That means my model, like my, this, all these fields, all these columns in my database is now created. All right, cool. Now, the main thing is, okay, now we have a database with all the required fields. But to show some data, like we should have some sample data, right? Like we should have a method in which we can add questions to this database in the backend, right? So that can be done via templates again. So if you remember in the past thing, I covered the templates, right? For example, if you want to do some DB operations in your backend, you can do simple HTML templates in your templates folder. And in that, you can interact with your database basically. All right. So let me go ahead and make a form in, let me make a form in this templates folder, which will basically give me the option to add questions to this database. Currently, our database is made, but it doesn't have any questions, right? So we need to populate the database. So we'll do that. Cool. I'll just make directory. All these forms and all HTML code. It should be in the templates directory in Flask. That's how it runs. If I go to templates, let me make what should be add questions .html. Let me skip this part like of HTML. I think everyone knows that. I will just copy paste the code. It's pretty much simple, nothing rocket science here. I'll just paste it here. Let me save it first. What it does is simple thing, add questions to trivia app, and then it has few input labels, which is question ID, question name, option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4, and then the correct answer that you want to give. Then a submit button, which redirects to this route. Okay, which redirects to this route. So we have to make a route in our backend now, add questions that should accept a request from post request from this HTML. to add contents in your database. So if you remember in the last session, we had a lot of time debugging that what went wrong. So whenever you have a form here, whenever you have a form in any HTML and you have a submit button, so whenever you click on the submit button, the field that is mentioned in your actions, like the URL that is mentioned in your action, your like a window is redirected to this URL, and then the method that you want to give. So let's say I want to make a post request to this URL. So that's how it does. Okay. So since I am I'm giving some data from here to this URL, I should make a post request, not a get request. So I'm giving it as method equals post and action equals this. Now, since this is done, let's go ahead and make this route in my Flask backend server. Okay, cool. So this, I think the HTML code was pretty much simple, right? I nothing much. If you have any doubts, let me know. Okay, now the route is the main thing. Let's go and make a route called as API dot route. Then it should be view questions, right? No, 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 not view, add questions. Okay, now in here I need to, since it's a post method, I need to give it as post here. Okay, now, okay, it's also a get, right? First, that form should be shown when we choose the get, when we make a get request, and whenever the data needs to be added. Okay, let me just write it and then I will tell you what's going on. Yeah. Okay, now let me do a def. What is this? Add questions. So I have included both get and post method here. If you don't include anything, if you omit this basically method, by default it takes your get method only in this URL. Okay. So all this was just get methods. But since we're introducing post as well, so we need to add it here. So now since we have both requests, let's check what request we are getting. So if request dot method equals get, then what I should do is I should render my HTML form, right? That will add questions to this DB. So I'll just do return render template again from last session. I shouldn't be taking much time in here. A return render template, and it should be what? Add questions dot html. Okay, and elif request dot method equals post. I have to do a lot of stuff, but as of now, I won't do anything. Let's see. Let's first see what happens. Okay, and now since we are importing this, let's import all of these libraries also from here, from Flask, and we'll do request and render template as well because we're using it. Let's save it and then run our server again. Then let's go to add questions, right? All right, now you can see this pretty much simple HTML page. The HTML code was just for this, okay? Just this heading, then few fields. It's pretty much simple. So for this, let me just do some sample questions that I have option 2. So I'm just giving my ID as 1. What is 2 plus 3? That is my question name. Options 1, 2, 3. Then finally correct option also 5. Then I'm giving what should be my correct answer. So out of these 4 options, 5 is my correct answer. Now if I do add question, it will make a post request to this, right? But I am not covering it in my backend currently. I haven't written any code that will take care if a post request is made to this method. That I need to do. But whenever a get request is made, this template, this form is loaded. Okay, so that's working. Now let's go ahead and make the post part as also, so that we can add our questions to the database. All right. So it's, what we'll do is unique ID equals request dot form, then unique ID. So all this, so basically in the form, if you remember in the form HTML form, we have created a field called as this field, this is the question ID. In the HTML form, this is the ID of this tag or ID of this input element is basically unique ID. Okay, so I'm fetching the value of whatever is in this field, that is question ID, via this method. So I'll do this similarly for question name. I'll do this for option 1, option 2, option 3, and all of that. Then I'll add it to my database. Okay, let me do that. So if this is done, unique ID, then I have to do question equals, since it's pretty much, I'll just do write this code for this, and then I will focus on the main part. This should be question, and then this should be option 1 equals request dot form, and then option 1. And Let me copy the other parts. It's pretty much self-explanatory. Yeah, let me copy it down. Indentation. Okay, I can fix this. Let me try. Oh, it worked. All right. So option one, option two, same thing. I'm fetching it. Option three, option four. Then correct answer also I'm fetching it. I'm just doing a print to see my values as of now. Okay, let the print be working. Now I'm making a record. Okay, I'm just making a variable called as record. I'm calling the name of the database, that is trivia. If you remember this trivia, and in there I'm passing all the variables, like unique id is unique id, question is question. So see, this part, this unique id is basically whatever is named here. Okay, unique id, since I have the same names for both the variables, don't get confused. You can name it this variables anything you want, but accordingly you have to change it in the second parameter basically. Okay, so I'm just naming it the same for, standard, maintaining the standard. Then I'm passing it, I'm making the record, and then I'm just adding it to the database with db.session.add. Then I'm making a commit. So let's say all of this worked successfully. Then I'm doing, hey, the record with id, this thing. So record with id was successfully added. If there was some exception, I'm doing, sorry, could not add your question with id this. Okay, so I think it's understood, right? Let me just save this. Now my post part of my endpoint is also done. Now I, some syntax error, except exception is e. Okay, what is there? Exception is e. Oh, okay, this should be indented right here. Okay, there is no try. Okay, I should do it inside try first. Try, and then indent all of this code to one level inside. I hope you know what is try except, right? It's just to catch errors before happening then. So if there is an error in processing any of this code, the execution stops and it goes like executes this part basically. Okay, so that's what it does. Let me fix the indentation also. This should go one level down, one level down. Yeah, and this should fix it. Now if I go to this, okay, now if I, let me, this is my get request. If I do add question, there is some error again. Let's see that. Trivia takes no arguments. Okay, you can see this is printed, right? So all these variables that was fetched from my form, that is getting printed. Trivia takes no arguments. There is some error. Let me see that. Trivia takes no arguments. Let me save the hassle. I'll just copy it. Let's see what Google gives us. Okay, Flask me and it should be db.column and okay, I've done this also. db.create all. Still there is an error. Takes no arguments. Let me try this instead of passing this a question specifically. Let me do it like this if it works. Okay, it's trivia, right? Trivia, yeah, should be working. Just a second, guys. Let me try to fix the error. Yes. And could not add a question with ID1. Takes no arguments. I think uh, this is not, the database is not formed. Let me do one thing. Let me create my database again then, if that's the problem. I'll just do db.drop all. First to drop all the tables and then I'll create the table again. Okay. Let's give it a shot. If that will work. So I'll go to my add, not sorry, create db. My database is created. And now let me go to get questions. So yeah, one, one, two, then I'll just do PVA takes no arguments. Why is it? Hmm. Okay. I think I missed something. Yeah, in here I should do db.model. Okay, I shouldn't like take this thing. This is the basic syntax. Like, what is my database? And I was missing that. So it's saying that the the database, that the table that you are making, it's actually, there is nothing called that. Like, I can't. There is no columns in that. So I should be using this as argument first. db.model. Okay, miss that syntax. Okay, once this is done, let me run my app again and let me make my database again, right? Create db. Okay, database is created successfully. Now if I do questions, add questions, in here let me give the id. What is 2 plus 3? 1, 2, 3, and then 5. Let me put it here as 5. Add question again. Okay, now I know how to fix this. I shouldn't have copied. Let me copy the whole line again. Basically, I missed this part, right? I missed the placeholder first, like unique text, like the column names first. So I should have not done that. Let me change it. I'll delete this record. And then I'll just, so I'm just adding the column names back here. Okay, as the first argument. Okay, once this is done, now this should work at any cost. I'll just do it again. Okay, record with ID1 was successfully added. Congrats. So now we have something in our database at least. Okay, something. Now, if we have something, let's view the data then. So we'll make a route to view it. Vim app.py. So now our database is created. Some values added to it. Now we should focus on two endpoints that should return all questions. Like whatever the questions I have, that should be returned, and validate is also should be done. Okay. So let's go ahead and make those endpoints. I hope everything is clear till this point. And that API.route, and let me go here and let's say return questions. Okay, so it's a get. Let me make it as a get request only. Let's whenever someone makes a get request, I'll return all the questions as JSON from here. Okay, I'll just do def return questions. Then I will write my function. So I'll first query the table. Let's say all quests equals trivia dot query dot, I think, all. I think this will work, right? Query dot all, yeah. And I'll just return this also. I'll tell you how this works. Yeah. Okay. So as I told you, will be returning a JSON format only, returning all the data in a JSON format. Okay, that's the standard way. So this line basically queries all the database and gives me all the queries, stores in an object. Now this is a database object, right? SQLite database object, SQL Alchemy object. Basically, we cannot just return directly, or we cannot just directly pass it in the JSONify function to the front end. It will give you errors. So first we'll fix the format. So in here, what we are doing is inside JSONify, we are actually making it as we're trying to make it as a JSON object. Okay, so inside here, I am making property called as questions, which has the value of all the questions as a list. Okay, this is an array, right? This has all the questions in as an array, and this is the value of this property. So all of this, like this is an object. Inside the object I have this property called as questions, and the value of this property is an array storing all my questions. So what I'm doing is, inside this array I'm basically making a for loop for question all questions is basically, okay, I have to change it up here. This should be all quests. Okay, so this is my query, this is my result set, right, after querying the database. So inside that I'm making a for loop, and for every question that I'm getting in the database, I'm actually adding it, like I'm getting its unique ID, and then I'm processing it as unique ID. Then I'm getting the question of that, then option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4, then correct answer, and then storing it as an object in an array. Okay, so this is being done for all the questions. So this is basically the loop format. I'm looping through the database, and then I'm like storing it in a JSON and returning that JSON. Okay, so don't worry if you don't understand the syntax. As you go along, you'll be getting it. Okay, it's not the first track, but try to understand what's going on basically. So if I do Flask run, try to understand that if you just directly pass that JSON object on the result set, it won't work. You have to query it to the result set and then make a JSON yourself, then pass it along to your. So if I do return questions, I make a get request. Okay, there is some error. JSONify is not defined. We have not imported it. Import it. All right. Now if I do Flask run, oh, this should work. Yeah. See, this gives me a JSON, and it has questions, some property called as questions, and inside it's basically a list or an array, and inside it has all the questions. Like this is for question 1, right? Unique ID 1. So if I have another question, it will add another record inside this array. So on, it will be giving you the entire list. Okay. So now this request is like this JSON is being returned by this endpoint that will be required in our front end. All right. Cool. Now, so one part is done. Now only one last endpoint is left for our backend, that is to validate, right? So whenever the user enters some value in the trivia app in the front end, we need to validate like whether the answer, like whether the option that he chose was correct or not in our backend. So we'll make a endpoint, let's say validate question, okay, and then method, let's say validate question. All right, in here, let me first get my form data as request dot json. I think it's request dot, just a second, get json. Yeah, force equals to get json equals to. So what it does is, it's basically whenever a request is made to this URL from the front end, it tells like the get JSON method tells basically to pass the request as a JSON. Okay, so I'm making it, even if you are not giving it a JSON from the front end, make it as a JSON. Okay, so that's what force equals to is doing. So now once I have the form data in JSON, like form data, what will I have? It should have, like what I feel is it should have the challenge ID. Also, sorry, not the challenge, question ID. Okay. It should have the question ID, like for what question the user is requesting, like whether it is correct or not, to check the answer it is correct or not. So it should be in my form data, and it's a, like say, unique ID, right? And let's say the answer that he is providing, the user. So this should be also in my form data and answer. All right. Now my work is to get first of all get this question from my table. Okay. Once I get the question, then I'll compare this answer with the answer, the correct answer in this question. If both are same, I'll return a response code, like a success response code. Else, I'll return a like error, like a wrong response code, something like that. Let's do that. So first, I will first get this right. Is question. Let me say that, and I will just pass it on trivia dot query dot filter by trivia dot unique id equals, and then this is question id dot all. Okay, so this will give me the question. Basically this will give me the question for which I'm filtering it right with a query. So this will be giving the question for which the user is requesting. So and then I will do if this question, like if this question is valid, like if this question whatever the user wants, if it exists in my database, I will get my answer. Let's say, okay, this should be if correct answer or not. Or let me say it as is answer correct. Okay, equals, sorry, let me do a if first. So if is question dot correct answer equals answer, then my is correct answer should be true. Okay, else it should be false. So I hope you get what is going on, right? I'm first saying if the question exists in my database. If it exists, then I'm fetching the correct answer from the database, and then the answer that is entered by the user. If both are same, I'm assigning true to this variable. Else, I'm assigning false to this variable. Okay, is correct answer. Now I think we need to. Okay, now we just need to return that JSON. Okay, now we return JSONify again, and then we will do valid equals is, okay, is correct answer. Okay, else if let's say if the question doesn't exist in my database, I'll just return a response with status code equals 4. That should be all. Let me just go through the code again. So is correct answer basically gives you if the answer is correct or not. So based on if it's correct or not, I am sending it as a JSON. Like I'm this is my property, and this is whether it is correct or not, and I'm sending it back to my client, like my front end. So this is what I'm doing. So let me just import the response since I'm using it. Response, okay. All right. Now that should be all. Yeah, I think that's all. Let's see if you want to check something, I'll just show you real quick. But since we can't make okay, this is currently a get request, right? A get request. So what I will do is I will just give sample data in here. Okay, question ID and answer. So I will just give question ID equals 1 and answer equals 5. If you remember, this was our correct answer. So let's see if it's working properly or not. Flask run, and then in here let's go to our validate question. Okay, edit first. Validate question, wasn't it the endpoint? Let me check. Validate question. Yep, validate question. No, it's correct only, right? Validate question. Okay, okay, okay. I should comment out this also, right? Let me check if this works. Internal server. Oh, I should. There is some error with my. Yeah. What I can do is, it if you see the error, it tells me Filter by takes one position argument, but two were given. Let's go. Filter by trivia ID equal question ID. Okay, is it? Okay, okay, it's not filter. I can either do it as filter or filter by. So if I do it as filter, this should be the syntax. Or if I'm doing it as filter by, it should only be question ID. Okay, not the other part, just this thing. It should be either this or the whatever I'm doing now, like filter and then all of this. Filter by question ID or filter trivia dot unique ID equal question ID. And instead of all, let me just do the first, because there should be only one question. Let's assume like there is only single question. Okay, let's like for us there are no duplicate questions. Okay, that's what I'm assuming. So if that is happening, if I will do my Flask run. Now you can see it gives you this. It returns you a response saying valid equals false. Valid equals false. If we go back here, this is false because it's actually a string. Okay, let me try it with giving it like this. This should be working. You can see this is true. So basically what we are doing is we are essentially checking whether it's performing correctly or not. Okay, by making a get request, but essentially from your react end, it will make a post request only. So what I will do, I'll just add a method here, and I will just make it only post, so that the no one can make a get request to this method. Okay, we want to secure it, right? So this was just to test. Now this is working, so our backend code is ready and done. Okay, it's already time, but yeah, I think we'll extend around 30 minutes. If Samrat is fine, then we'll close this up, like from the front end as well. Okay. uh, so this was the back end of the app. We did whatever we planned to. Any doubts, anyone? If not, Samrat, I think we can continue for the front end.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll continue. Just a second. You guys can see the screen, right?
Yep, it's visible.
Okay, so can you push the code for the backend? So I'll pull it from my end.
Already pushed, Samrat.
Or push.
Yeah, everything is already pushed. Maybe your screen is stuck actually.
Must have
Now
been.
it's visible. Now it's visible. Okay, you can continue.
So this we have our validate question endpoint and our return questions endpoint. Okay. So yeah, guys, we told you how to make the form on Flask itself, because making forms in React is another kind of forms, and I did not really want to go into that in these sessions. We're keeping them simple, but you can make this form in React as well. Okay, but for now, let's check the questions. So I'll backend is working, my front end is working. First of all, let's put the API URL on our front end, and let's try fetching to it. Okay. We make a use effect. I'm just trying a simple fetch over here, just to check if the backend config on my end is proper. For fetching, if you put async over here, so if you pass an async function to use effect, you can use top level await. You can use await syntax directly in the use effect function. You don't have to use a then syntax all the time. So get a response which is fetch API URL slash, and what's the return questions. Let's put here.
Screen is stuck, Samrat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait. Is it working or still stuck?
It's still stuck. I think just try to reshare once here.
Can you see?
Yeah, yeah, it's visible.
So this is our code to just test out our fetching. Okay, so right now it says, should say trivia app. Oh, there are some errors used. Oh, wow. I didn't import after importing things properly. It's not, user must not return anything besides the function. I use that isn't really returning. I don't know. Just wait a second. Just rerun the app. Mm, okay, okay. This casing function. This needs to be inside a function. What we'll do is function things. We are defining a function called fetch questions inside our use effect, and then just
Screen stuck again, Sumit.
yes, this will cause problems. I think because if I'm on my phone data, it's I mean I was not able to properly hear your voice on that,
Okay, okay,
so I'm back on the hostel Wi-Fi. My phone
okay.
is
All
already
right.
slow.
Yeah, I'll tell you if it's stuck. You can
Yeah.
continue.
So, so inside a use effect, we create an async function and we immediately call it. We have to do this kind of thing so I can use this await syntax instead of dot then. Okay, but no, that's okay. No problems here, and we get a question which is what is 2 plus 1 equals 3. Okay, this option. So we can fetch the questions from the backend. Okay, that is working. So let's start working on this. So right now our app only returns trivia apps. So just make a heading and all. Trivia app. Okay. Now what we want here is we want to render questions, okay, in a list. And so I'm going to tell you how I approach these kind of problems. So what we essentially want is we want a piece of state, and that state will hold all the questions. So first, over here, so we need our questions and set questions equal to new state. Initially, our list of questions is empty. Okay, this is just an empty list. We can put in the state over here. Now we have an empty list over here, and what we will do instead of console logging data, we will set questions data. And over here, now we can just do data.map. Okay, it's the structure of our data that we're getting over here. It is questions is an array. Option 1, option 2, question. Option 1, option 2, option 3, correct answer. Uh-oh, clicked the wrong app by mistake. Yeah, we get. Okay. We map it to a div. Okay, the key is question. We'll unpack the question before we question option 1, option 3, option 4. And just one thing, this correct answer shouldn't be returned on the front to the front end, because if it's returned, we don't have. I'll read on the class server once again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So this should work. The ID is question. Let's just show the question. So let's see if we can render our question over here. Some error. Data not defined. Const data is right. Rest.json. Data is not defined.
Screen is stuck again, Samrat.
Oh, okay. Wait, just a second. Just a second. Huh? Just is it visible?
Yeah, it's visible now. Oh wait, it's not.
Oh, can you still not see it?
Yeah, yeah, not like it's. Now we can see. Now we can see. All right. Yeah, continue, please.
Okay. I was having a problem. Data is not defined. Data is not defined. Yes. Oh, this should be questions. Error.
I think it should be questions. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Questions.map is not a function. So it's saying questions.map is not a function, which means question isn't an empty array, which is what is this? Okay, wait. Yeah. So our data that we're getting, this data variable is just an object which has a questions field inside it. So we need to set data.questions to questions, and this should work. Yeah, this is working now. So we have our questions, and we can see this question is being rendered. Okay. So, yeah, so what we've done till now, we're setting up state over here, some questions, and we're just fetching those questions using use effect. So whenever we click so whenever this page opens for the first time, this function will be ran. Okay, questions length equals 0. What I'm doing here, so yeah, it's a little bit of conditional rendering here. If our questions list is 0, then it will say please reload. So if I'm reloading the page, you'll see for a fraction of a second, it says please reload over here. So this will help us tell if there's ever an error where we can't fetch questions. Okay. So now we have our questions here, and what we want is we want to display these two questions over here. So first of all, we want to show all the options for each question. Okay. So what I'm doing, I'll show the question one div, and in another div, I'll make four buttons. So I will make a button, and this button will have option one. You see this is working, and right now when I'm clicking them, nothing is working. So what we need to do is
Screen
whenever
stuck, Samrit. Again, reshare, please.
can you see it now?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay, so I have done this over here. You can see every option over here. One another slight options I will, one another change I will make over here. It's just random options. Right now we are getting each question over here, each option over here, and we are able to display it on our app. Okay, so we can see the question over here and all of the different options inside uh, individual buttons. So now what we want to do is we need to click on a button, and when we click the button we need to fetch our API, send a request to our API, and say please validate this question for me. Okay, so on click we will just call validate, give it option one. Now let's create this validate function over here. Validate, it takes an option. Okay, takes an option, an async function which takes an option and then fetches our API. And what does our API respond with if it's correct? A valid option, a valid
Valid
which
equals
is
true.
true or
Yeah.
false. No? Okay, so what we do again, const response is we fetch our API, validate question, this, data, valid, dot, valid. And for now, let's alert this. And if the answer is valid, we can alert work. Else we can alert. Sorry, try again. And uh, there is an error in the response status 400. Disqualified. It's saying unexpected token. This is not valid JSON.
I think we haven't. Have we applied course actually?
No, no, it's not
Yeah,
a
not
pause error.
course. Yeah, it's actually saying HTML, I think.
Yeah, it's getting HTML in the.
Oh yeah, Samit, we need to make a post request, right? For this.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, right. So
Yeah, yeah.
and we need to give the question as well, right? Unique ID and answer. That is the format we need to send, right? I, I totally forgot about that. Just a second. Validate with unique ID and question. So this unique ID we will also send it.
Reshare your screen, Samit, please.
Hostel Wi-Fi is very problematic.
Yep, visible now.
In the request options, we need to give an head do a header which has content type, right? What was the remember how we give the header for a post request? First of all, this method is post, body is JSON dot. Okay, so guys, if you need to convert any JavaScript object into JSON, there's this stringify function in the JSON class. So JSON dot stringify, whatever you give inside it, we, so what we are doing here is we are this validate function takes in the option and the unique ID, and then we are fetching to the API with a post method. So post method hides the you can't see the data being sent in the URL of the post method. Okay, it's in the body of the method, and then the body is this. We're sending a string like this, and let's try this one's. Sorry, try again. I only implemented this for the first option.
Did it work? Actually, it wasn't visible.
Wait, 1 second. I'll just create these buttons for each option now.
Uh,
What? Bit so easy to. So now we have a button for each question. So for option 1, on click it sends option 1 through here, and for option 2 it sends option 2 over here. So we have these 4 buttons. Good work. Okay, so it is working. So you guys can see it's working, right? On clicking 2 it says sorry, but on clicking 5 it says good work.
yep.
Okay, so I'll just go over how it's working again. So whenever this app function mounts, this use effect will run and fetch our questions from the backend. Okay, in this fetch questions function, we are setting the questions in the state over here. So when that happens, everything gets rerun. It's rerun. Our state has some questions. Now, when the length is greater than 0, what happens? We map over the questions list. Okay, we unpack each question into these options, into these keys, and then we render this div for each of those questions. So we have a div which contains a question and the 4 options, and each option is a button, and on click every time it runs this validate function, and this validate function takes in an option and a unique ID, and it sends a post request to our backend to validate if this answer is correct or not. Okay, and if our answer is valid, it says good work. If it's not, it says try again.
Somebody reshare the screen, please.
I don't know what this error is, but yeah. So when was the screen stuck? Should I go over it again or?
Yeah, you just go over the code again, like you are saying that. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, when this function is run, use effect is done. We fetch our questions from the backend, and those questions are in this state over here. And now we map over each of these questions. Okay, unpack each question into these the options, the question, and the ID of the question. Okay, we render this div for each of them, each question, and we have the question over here and 4 buttons for the 4 options, and each option sends calls this validate function on being clicked, and it just tells us if it's in option 3 and the unique ID of the question. And in this validate function, we take in the option and the unique ID, and we call our API. Okay, we make a fetch request. We say it's a post method, and these are the things we are passing, and it returns an answer, and we just use that answer to say good work or sorry, try again, whatever. Okay. So one more thing we can do is we can mark which questions have been which questions have been answered, and increase the user score for all of those questions. Okay, so what we'll do for that, we can do that in a couple ways. What I will do is on validating, yeah, I'll just create, you know what, let's just make a simple score counter for now because it's getting late and work, I have JComs to finish. Score and set score to state 0. So initially the users,
Screen share again, Samrid.
it's very difficult doing this with this problem happening. We'll end in a couple minutes, guys, because
Yeah, I think we
we'll
just go
have
with
to.
the scores and then just add two questions more to see how it looks like. I think that should be it.
Okay. We have the score variable over here, and in this score variable over here, and if you click on the wrong option, nothing happens. Okay. And here in the validate question, if the answer comes out valid, we just set score. We set the score variable to be score plus 1. This state gets updated. And if you click 5, it says okay, and the score is incremented. Now we're not tracking this if this has been answered or not, so it will just keep on implementing. But this is just a demo app to show you guys. But yeah, this is the front end for an app. It's a very simple front end. I'll just add a couple more questions. How do I add a question in localhost?
I just I think it's add question, add hyphen question.
What's URL?
Yeah, yeah.
Add hyphen questions. Question ID will be, let's say, 101. Question name is which is not a, let's go. I was thinking that I could show you guys how to make this form on React as well, but this screen getting stuck thing is very, very annoying. Like, we'll have to end this before that.
Yeah, we can take on like other sessions out there. They will come in advanced stuff also. We can do it later.
Let's add this question. Okay, this question has been added, and if we go on our site, we refresh it. We have two questions. Okay, what is 2 plus 3, and which of these is not a Linux distro? You click on Ubuntu, it says that is it. Click on Vista, it says good work, and our score is incremented here. Okay, so that's how it works. Any question on the front end side? I just breezed through it, but this is pretty simple. Like we've done all of this already. Just we're just applying this to a different problem. And I didn't go into the design of the front end, like formatting these properly and all. You guys can do that. Just using React, using useState and these functions to fetch and all, that was the only thing I was trying to get across here. Any questions?
Guys, any doubts? Anyone?
No way. Understood.
Okay.
Okay, so
Hope
yeah,
it was clear, right?
yeah, we have already covered all of this. We're just
Yeah,
doing it once again.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of a revision. In session 2 and 3, we already covered this.
Yeah. So
All.
we'll push this code, and you guys, if you want to download this code and run it yourself and see if you can improve anything or just work on this, you have at least a demo code to work off on, and you can try to even make it a proper app, with user logins and everything. Just look up how that stuff works. You have a base to do that now.
Yeah, basically, like what you can do now currently is you can make user registration. Like the user should log in, and based on that, you can save their scores in the database. Like for every user, first of all, you can make the user credentials in the database, then authorize the user. If he logs in, you can save his score, past score. You can implement high scores, like in every session, what was the highest score, and then yeah, you can work on making the UI better in the front end. And there are a lot of stuff basically in the back end. What you need to focus after this, which is important, is authentication, user authentication. Like how will you handle a user who is logging in and then send it back to the front end and the back end. And in the front end, yeah, making mastering over CSS, that's like that's endless, right? It will be as much as you go through, there will be more stuff. Just go through it. Yeah, I think that covers everything in your web development. As of now, what you got to know is like how to make two separate apps working and integrate them, and how to work in databases, make your backend server, then write the logic, and then make secure apps basically. Like in the front end, you won't know what is the correct answer. Like these are all the basic codes that were like put together to make our CTF platform, right? So this is how it started. So this is your base. Like you got to know how to integrate stuff, how to work on stuff separately. Now it's your work to, you can go ahead in any of these, either back end or front end or both, and make good apps in web development. I think so. That sums up the session. And if you don't have any doubts, you can leave, I think. Thank you for joining. Like it's the exam time also.